Ladies and gentlemen, I will not speak of pitchforks or haunted artifacts. No, I will speak of more ordinary things, mundane, even delightful, until they are not. For there are objects in our lives that curse us not by magic spells, but by the quiet corrosion of soul. Let us consider 6 such demonic objects. Cursed not because they drip with blood or howl at midnight, but because they promise something divine while delivering something damned. The danger of vanity lies not in its loudness, but in its subtlety. It does not march into our lives with horns and fanfare. It whispers quietly, disguised as self-care, confidence, or ambition. It often begins with the simple desire to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be loved. But it soon twists that desire into something hollow. Vanity is not mere pride. Pride may sometimes hold convictions, even mistaken ones, but vanity is far more slippery. It is not concerned with what is true, but with what is pleasing. It does not ask, "Is this right?" but rather, "Does this make me look good?" Vanity is a mirror, but not the sort that reflects you honestly. It is a carnival mirror, bending reality to flatter you. It highlights the traits you like and filters out the ones you don't. It edits your flaws, polishes your image, and tells you what you already want to believe. But in doing so, it blinds you. It prevents you from seeing the real contours of your soil, and eventually you become a stranger to your own self. The man who stares too long into this kind of mirror does not find self-knowledge. He finds only self-deception. What makes vanity so dangerous is that it distorts not only how we see ourselves, but also how we perceive truth itself. A vain person does not seek truth for its own sake. Truth for him is valuable only when it serves to elevate his image. If a fact threatens his appearance or calls for change, it is dismissed, ignored, or twisted. Vanity makes the truth conditional, acceptable only when it flatters. In this way, vanity becomes a curse, not because it destroys all at once, but because it slowly erodes our ability to discern what is real. When a person becomes addicted to the curated image of themselves, whether through social media status or shallow praise, they begin to lose the courage to face the truth. They fear exposure, they fear imperfection, they fear the unfiltered reality of who they are, and so they retreat further into illusion. It is like building a home inside a painting. You may control every brushstroke, but you cannot live there. Reality will always press in. Vanity demands more and more sacrifices. Authentic relationships suffer because honesty becomes risky. Integrity becomes negotiable, because one must always appear right, even if they are not. Growth becomes impossible, because correction feels like attack. The person becomes fragile, defensive, and hollowed out. The very praise they sought begins to feel shallow, because deep down they know it is not aimed at the real them, but at a performance. Thus, vanity does not simply distort how one is seen by others. It changes the very lens through which one views the world. It trades truth for image, substance for shadow. And the longer one gazes into that flattering mirror, the less they remember what they really look like at all. Pride has a peculiar talent for loneliness. It builds high walls and calls them fortresses, not realizing they are prisons. Unlike confidence, which can coexist with humility, pride is a kind of spiritual armor worn not for protection, but for elevation. It does not say, "Ye, I am valuable," but "I am better." In doing so, it creates distance, not only from others, but from truth, from love, and from grace. At first, it feels like strength. There is a seductive power in believing oneself to be the master of all success, the author of every virtue, the deserving recipient of every blessing. But the higher pride climbs, the more isolated it becomes. The proud person lives in a world of comparison. Every interaction becomes a contest. Every achievement must be superior, every compliment a confirmation of superiority. Relationships become tools for validation or threats to one's self-image. Pride cannot tolerate equals, let alone mentors. To admit that another might be wiser, more gifted, or more beloved is to risk the fragile tower on which it stands. So pride pushes others away, not with cruelty, though sometimes that too, but with detachment. It refuses dependence, avoids vulnerability, and disguises weakness. It clings to the illusion of independence, even if it means solitude. Over time, pride turns blessings into entitlements. It cannot receive help without suspicion or gratitude without embarrassment. It begins to believe that it has earned everything, and therefore owes nothing. Gratitude, which requires the recognition of something undeserved, becomes a foreign language. Dependence feels like failure. And so, the proud man begins to walk alone. Not because he is unloved, but because he cannot bear the humility of receiving love he has not earned. Pride also blinds a person to their own flaws. To admit error is to admit limitation, and limitation feels like inferiority. Thus, even when confronted with truth, the proud soul resists correction. They justify, deflect, or deny. They may speak of standards or excellence, but often these are masks for self-exaltation. Pride cannot learn, because learning requires the confession of ignorance. It cannot repent, because repentance requires the confession of wrong. It cannot grow, because growth requires the recognition of need. In its final stages, pride begins to feel the ache of separation. The applause grows quieter, the achievements feel less fulfilling, the isolation becomes harder to ignore, and yet pride cannot ask for help, because to do so would be to admit the one thing it cannot bear, that it is not self-sufficient. So it suffers in silence, even while pretending to thrive. It hides its wounds behind performance and its sorrow behind superiority. Pride does not begin with malice. It often starts with desire, to be respected, to be known, to be capable. But untempered, that desire distorts. It cuts off the very things it seeks: community, connection, mercy. In trying to rise above others, pride forgets how to walk beside them, and in doing so it finds itself terribly alone. Words are not breath and sound alone. They are carriers of meaning, wielders of influence, builders or breakers of souls. Each word we speak echoes beyond the moment it is uttered, planting seeds in the minds and hearts of those who hear. Words carry moral weight because they shape reality, not always the external world, but certainly the inner one. A kind word can rescue a person from despair. A cruel word can remain lodged in a heart for a lifetime. What we say is never neutral. Every sentence reveals something of our character, and every conversation leaves a residue, either of healing or of harm. The power of speech lies not only in its content but in its intent. A lie told in jest may still wound. A truth told without love can still crush. The morality of words is not just in whether they are factually correct, but in the spirit in which they are given. When we speak, we do not merely exchange data, we influence souls. That is why gossip, slander, flattery, and manipulation are not simply impolite. They are ethical failures. They twist language from its rightful purpose, communion, and turn it into a weapon. To speak without conscience is to wield a blade without care for whom it cuts. It is to treat speech as though it were weightless, when in fact it carries the burden of human dignity. A careless comment may be forgotten by the speaker, but remembered forever by the hearer. Some wounds bleed invisibly, and the tongue is often the blade that causes them. We do not need to shout to do harm. We can do it with a whisper, a sigh, a passive-aggressive phrase clothed in civility. Even silence can be morally charged. To withhold a needed word, a word of truth or apology or encouragement, is to deny a gift we were meant to give. Words have the power to confess, to reconcile, to comfort, to instruct. When we withhold them out of pride, fear, or indifference, we commit a sin of omission. Just as we are accountable for the things we do, we are also accountable for the truths we silence. In every age, societies wrestle with the danger of words used poorly, propaganda that incites hatred, rhetoric that dehumanizes, euphemisms that excuse evil. Yet the temptation to misuse language begins not in parliaments or newspapers, but in our ordinary conversations. Every moment we speak, we make a moral choice, whether to build or to break, to reveal truth or to obscure it, to serve self or to serve others. Words are sacred not because they are mystical, but because they are entrusted to flawed creatures capable of great harm and great good. They can wound without drawing blood. They can bless without laying hands. They are small things with eternal consequences. To speak is to act, and every act carries weight. So does every word. Addiction does not begin with the desire to be enslaved. It begins with the desire to be filled. A man reaches for a drink, not because he wants to destroy himself, but because he hopes it will silence something within him. A woman returns again to a glowing screen, not because she is proud of the ritual, but because for a moment it makes her feel less alone. Addiction promises relief. It whispers that the ache can be soothed, the hunger quieted, the emptiness filled. But what it delivers is an echoing void that grows louder with every indulgence. The nature of addiction is deceptive. It appears first as comfort, then as habit, then as a chain. The thing that once offered a sense of escape becomes the very thing from which escape is needed. The pleasure it once gave begins to fade, but the hunger it stirs only grows. This is the paradox: the more we consume, the less we are satisfied. The soul, like the body, cannot be fed with poison and remain healthy. Addiction does not feed the soul, it numbs it. It gives the illusion of fullness while slowly hollowing us out. There are many forms of addiction, and not all of them come in bottles or needles. Work can be an addiction if it becomes a means to outrun failure or avoid self-reflection. Applause can be addictive when our identity hinges on being admired. Even perfectionism can be a kind of slavery, a constant pursuit of control to mask the terror of feeling inadequate. These addictions, though socially accepted, are no less corrosive. They all arise from the same source: the refusal to sit with emptiness. Rather than face the silence, we drown it in noise. Addiction thrives in secrecy. It prefers the dark. It grows in isolation, whispering that no one would understand, that no one must know. But in hiding it, we nourish it. And the longer we pretend it is under control, the more control it gains. It begins to shape our choices, distort our values, rewrite our relationships. The addiction becomes not just something we do, but part of who we believe we are. It replaces identity with dependency. And still, it never satisfies. That is the great tragedy. No matter how much we take, how often we return, how tightly we cling to the source, addiction never keeps its promise. The emptiness remains deeper and more painful each time. Because we were never meant to be filled by these things. They were never large enough to hold us. The human soul was made for joy, not distraction, for love, not craving, for communion, not compulsion. And every false filling only deepens the hole it claims to seal. Addiction is not merely a behavioral problem. It is a spiritual cry for something real, something lasting. But as long as we keep feeding the ache with what cannot satisfy, we ensure that the hunger will never end. Inauthenticity begins as a disguise. At first, it feels harmless, perhaps even necessary. We put on a face to be accepted, to be admired, to avoid rejection or judgment. It's the practiced smile at a party, the agreeable silence in a meeting, the curated life displayed to the world while hiding the one actually lived. Pretending to be someone else can feel like survival, but slowly, almost imperceptibly, the line between performance and person begins to blur. What begins as a mask becomes a mirror, and in time we forget what we looked like before we put it on. The danger of inauthenticity lies in its slow erosion of self. Every time we hide what we truly think or feel, every time we say yes when we mean no, we trade a piece of ourselves for comfort or approval. It may feel small, even virtuous. It's just easier this way, we tell ourselves. But over time, these small betrayals accumulate. We begin to shape our lives not by conviction, but by expectation. We look to others not for companionship, but for cues. What do they want me to be? What will keep them pleased, impressed, unthreatened? The answers to those questions become the script by which we live. The authentic self, the one that dreams, questions, longs, struggles, gets buried beneath layers of pretense. And the tragedy is that we begin to fear our own truth. We come to believe that the real self is not good enough to be seen. Vulnerability becomes a threat rather than a bridge. So we smile when we are aching, agree when we are doubtful, and perform a version of life we believe others want to see. In doing so, we become strangers to ourselves. This loss of identity isn't dramatic. It doesn't happen in a single moment, like a mask suddenly glued to the skin. It happens gradually. We begin to notice that we don't recognize our own desires. Our decisions feel less like choices and more like obligations. Relationships feel shallow, conversations rehearsed, We wonder why we feel exhausted by people when all we've done is exist around them. But the exhaustion isn't from others. It's from maintaining a persona. Inauthenticity also breeds fear. The more we hide, the more we fear being discovered. We become guarded, suspicious, competitive. Genuine intimacy becomes almost impossible because it requires the very thing we are unwilling to give our true selves. And when love does come our way, we doubt its sincerity. If someone loves the mask, how can they possibly love the person underneath? This doubt deepens the loneliness, which in turn drives more performance, and the cycle tightens. The soul cannot thrive in disguise. We were not made to live as echoes of others' expectations. The more we pretend, the more we lose sight of who we are and what we are meant to become. Authenticity is not always safe, but it is the only soil in which identity can grow. Without it, we do not merely live untruthfully, we begin to disappear. Procrastination wears a friendly face. It never roars like a lion or strikes like lightning. It merely suggests that everything can wait. It assures you that there will be more time, a better mood, a clearer mind tomorrow. And so it soothes you into stillness, not with fear but with comfort. This is what makes it so dangerous. Unlike overt rebellion or obvious evil, procrastination seems harmless. It appears reasonable, even wise. Why rush? Why press forward now, when rest is so near and urgency so far? But beneath this gentle surface lies a deeper decay, one that does not just delay action, but slowly erodes purpose. At its heart, procrastination is not a matter of laziness, it is a matter of misplaced value. It is not always the refusal to act, but the reluctance to act on what truly matters. It diverts attention to what is convenient and delays what is consequential. A person might stay endlessly busy, yet never move forward in the things that demand the most from the soul. Prayer, repentance, reconciliation, sacrifice. These are rarely urgent in the eyes of procrastination. They are important, yes, but always best dealt with later. This is where procrastination becomes a form of spiritual apathy. It doesn't scoff at holiness. It just schedules it for another day. It doesn't deny the need for change. It simply proposes that change can wait until the mood is better, the calendar is lighter, or the fear has passed. But the soul that continually delays what it knows to be right begins to harden. Sensitivity to truth dulls. Convictions lose their edge. The whisper of conscience becomes easier to ignore. Eventually, what once stirred the heart becomes routine, and what once troubled the spirit is met with indifference. Procrastination turns time into an idol. It assumes that we will have more of it, that it is ours to manage, control, and extend at will. But time is not a guarantee, it is a gift, and the arrogance of procrastination lies in believing that the gift will always be available. In the meantime, real opportunities for grace are passed by. The apology that should be made today grows colder with silence. The act of kindness meant for this moment is lost to another. The step of obedience that felt clear in the morning fades by nightfall. There is also a deception within procrastination that convinces us we will be more willing later than we are now. But habits of delay do not prepare us for action. They train us in avoidance. If we cannot do what is right today, we are unlikely to do it tomorrow. A soul that learns to wait for perfect conditions will rarely move at all. And while the clock ticks quietly, something inside us begins to decay, not with noise or drama, but with the slow drift of a heart that forgets what urgency is. Procrastination is not a passive vice. It is a quiet resistance to the call of the present moment, a refusal to meet today's duty with today's strength. It is the soul saying, "Not yet," when heaven is asking, "Why not now?"